I heard laughter and cheers from my house while I sat in my lawyer's office. My son texted, "Finally free! Mom's in the nursing home!" They threw a party to celebrate. The next morning, I walked through my front door with a document in my hand. When they saw what it was, their faces went white. Subscribe to the channel, leave your like and comment from which part of the world you are watching. Get comfortable and relax. Let's begin. The sound of laughter traveled through the closed car windows, a sharp, percussive burst that made my hands tighten on the steering wheel. My house, my own white clapboard house with the deep porch and the azalea bushes I'd planted 30 years ago, was glowing. Every window blazed with light. Shadows moved behind the curtains in the living room, a crowd of them. I had parked across the street under the old oak where the darkness was thick. The engine was off. The only sound was the faint thump of music from my home and the slow, deliberate measure of my own breathing. My phone, resting on the passenger seat, lit up with a new text. I looked at it. The screen cast a blue wash over the leather. It was from Marcus. "Finally free. Mom's in the nursing home. Party at the old house. Drinks on us." The words did not blur. They were crisp and black against the bright background. I read them once. Then I read them again. Finally free. I knew he hadn't meant to send it to me. It was for someone else, for a group chat I was not part of, a planning committee, a celebration committee. I looked back at the house. The front door opened, spilling a yellow rectangle onto the porch. My son-in-law, David, stepped out, laughing over his shoulder. He was carrying something. It took a moment for my eyes to adjust, to understand the shape in his hands. It was my bronze table lamp, the Art Deco one with the geometric shade that had been on my reading table for 20 years. He carried it down the steps and toward his SUV parked in my driveway. He opened the tailgate and placed it inside, carefully, as if it were already his. The door opened again. My granddaughter, Lily, emerged. She was 16, wrapped in my favorite silk scarf, the emerald green one with the subtle paisley pattern. She tossed one end of it back with a theatrical flip of her wrist, a gesture she'd seen in a movie, and laughed at something someone inside said. She wore my scarf. She was wearing it while they celebrated my departure to a place I had never agreed to enter. A cold clarity settled over me, a layer of ice forming on a turbulent lake. The hurt was there, deep and vast, but it was suddenly far away, muted. This was observation. This was data collection. I remembered the conversations of the last 6 months. They were not arguments, not then. They were gentle insistences. "Mom, you're forgetting things," Chloe would say, her voice syrupy with concern, when I misplaced my reading glasses for the 3rd time in a week. "We're just worried about you being alone." Marcus, more direct. "The house is too much for you. It's an asset, but it's a liability, too. We need to think practically." They had started just looking at places, just to see what's out there. The Haven, Sunny Meadows, names that sounded peaceful and bland. I had gone along on 2 tours, silent, noting the shiny linoleum, the pervasive smell of disinfectant over boiled vegetables, the residents lined up in the common room like waiting luggage. I had said I would think about it. I had never said yes, but they had heard what they wanted to hear. My quietness, my reluctance, they had translated into senility, into a problem to be solved. They had set a date. They had planned a transition. And now, believing me safely installed in a room at Sunny Meadows, they had come to claim the spoils. Another figure filled the doorway, Chloe, my daughter. She held a wine glass aloft, saying something to the room behind her. I could see her profile, the familiar smile now twisted into a hostess's glee. She was in her element, the center of a happy occasion. My removal was a happy occasion. I started the car. The sound was too loud in the quiet street. I put it in gear and pulled away from the curb slowly without headlights for the first 50 feet. In the rearview mirror, my house receded, a bright, noisy jewel in the dark street. No one looked out. No one saw the dark sedan slipping away. I did not drive toward Sunny Meadows. I drove toward the interstate. I had packed a small bag 2 days ago after a final definitive conversation with Ms. Evans. It was in the trunk. I had told Marcus I was going to spend a night with an old friend from my library days to talk about the move. He had been so pleased, so approving. "That's a great idea, Mom. Get some support." The hotel was a chain near the highway, anonymous and clean. I checked in under my own name. The young man at the desk did not look twice at me. I was just another woman of a certain age with a rolling suitcase. The room was beige and silent. I placed my bag on the luggage stand and sat on the edge of the bed. The quiet was absolute. It was different from the silence in my car. This was empty. This was a pause. I thought of the contents of my safe deposit box, visited just that afternoon, the new will, the trust documents, the deed already quietly recorded, Ms. Evans's crisp, confident voice. "Once you sign these, Eleanor, the structure is in place. The house belongs to the trust, which you control. The distributions are at your sole discretion. They have no claim, no leverage, unless you give it to them." I had signed. We had shaken hands. Her handshake was firm, dry. "It's a good plan," she had said. "It protects you." I had not known then how immediately I would need that protection. I had thought I would have weeks, perhaps months, before their pressure became a shove. I had underestimated their greed, their unseemly haste. My phone buzzed again on the nightstand. A call this time. Chloe. I watched the screen flash, her smiling photo appearing and disappearing. I did not answer. The call went to voicemail. A moment later, a text popped up. "Hi, Mom. Just thinking of you on your first night in your new place. Hope you're getting settled. We're all here at the house just having a little family time. We miss you. Love you." The lie was so smooth, so effortless. It was the polish over the rotten wood. Family time. While David loaded my lamp into his car, while Lily practiced her gestures in my scarf, while Marcus toasted his freedom from me, I placed the phone face down on the nightstand. I stood and walked to the window. The view was of the parking lot and the highway beyond, a river of red and white lights. This was not my home. This neutral, temporary box was not my home. But the brightly lit house full of celebrating thieves was no longer my home either. Not in the way that mattered. Home, I realized with a cold finality, was not a place anyone could give you. It was not a building they could take away. It was what you built inside yourself. And they had, with their laughter and their toasts and their texting, burned the old one down. Tomorrow, I would walk into the ashes, but I would not be rebuilding what they had destroyed. I would be building something entirely new, on a foundation they knew nothing about. And the first stone had already been laid, not in anger, but in the quiet professional office of Ms. Evelyn Evans, Esky. I drew the curtains closed, blocking out the lights. The room was dark. I did not sleep for a long time. I lay in the dark, and I planned my return. The morning light through the hotel's thin curtains was gray and unforgiving. I had slept in short, fractured intervals, my mind cycling between the image of my lamp in David's hands and the solid weight of the plan in my mind. I rose at 6, showered in the small stall and dressed in one of my better trouser suits, a deep navy wool. I applied a minimal amount of makeup, careful and precise. I was not dressing for my children. I was dressing for the battlefield, and my armor was competence. The drive to Ms. Evans' office took 20 minutes. The city was waking up, commuters filling the streets, but my direction was toward the quieter, professional districts. Her office was in a low, modern building of glass and pale stone. I had been here 3 times before over the past 4 months. Each visit had been a clandestine operation, scheduled when Marcus was in a meeting or Chloe was at her yoga class. Her receptionist, a young man with a calm demeanor, nodded as I entered. "Good morning, Mrs. Hawthorne. Ms. Evans is expecting you." He led me back to the same conference room. It was a space of quiet power, a long mahogany table, leather chairs, a wall of windows looking out onto a small courtyard garden. The The morning sun streamed in, catching motes of dust in the air. Ms. Evans was already there, standing at the head of the table with a file folder in front of her. She wore a tailored gray suit, her glasses perched on her nose as she reviewed a page. "Eleanor," she said, looking up. Her voice was even, professional, but her eyes held a warmth I had come to rely on. "Please sit. Can I get you some coffee or water?" "No, thank you," I said, taking the seat at the table's center. I placed my purse on the floor beside me. She sat as well, sliding the folder toward her. "I received your voicemail last night. I'm so very sorry that it came to that. Are you all right?" The question was not about my feelings. It was a tactical assessment. Was I coherent? Was I steady? I nodded once. "I am functional. I observed them for approximately 15 minutes. My son Marcus sent a text celebrating my move to the nursing home. My daughter-in-law removed my bronze Art Deco lamp from the living room. My granddaughter was wearing my emerald silk scarf. There were at least 12 other vehicles parked on my lawn and the street. Ms. Evans did not react with shock or sympathy. She gave a slow, deliberate nod, her lips pressing into a thin line. She made a note on a legal pad. "Documentable observations. Good. And you are certain they believe you to be at Sunny Meadows?" "They believe I spent last night there, yes. My son called it my first night in my new place in a text this morning." I did not correct him. "Perfect." She opened the folder. Inside were several documents, their pages crisp and densely printed. "Then we are procedurally in the clear. Their actions, based on that mistaken belief, are their own. We have already executed the foundational instruments. What we do today is the final activation." She extracted a single sheet of paper. "This is a summary letter from me to you, confirming the changes to your estate plan. It is written in clear, non-legalese terms. I advise you to provide this to your family. It will serve as an unambiguous notification." She passed the page to me. I read it. The language was indeed clear. "Be advised that as of date, Eleanor Hawthorne has revoked all prior wills and codicils. The property at my address has been transferred to the Hawthorne Living Trust, of which Eleanor Hawthorne is the sole grantor and trustee. Distributions from the trust are solely at the discretion of the trustee. Upon the death of the grantor, the remainder of the estate shall pass to the designated charitable beneficiaries." It listed the charitable organizations: the local library foundation, a historical society, a scholarship fund for mature students. My children's names appeared only once, in a single clause. "Marcus Hawthorne and Chloe Hawthorne Smith are expressly excluded from any inheritance, distribution, or benefit for reasons known to them." "The reasons known to them," I said, looking up. "A standard phrasing. It prevents a claim of accidental omission. It states that the exclusion is intentional and implies they understand why, which they will shortly." Ms. Evans's tone was dry. "The full trust documents and the new will are here, already signed and notarized. The deed transfer was recorded with the county clerk yesterday afternoon. The house is legally out of their reach. They cannot force a sale. They cannot claim you are incompetent to manage it, as you are not the direct owner. The trust is, and you are the trustee in full control. It is a firewall." I listened, absorbing the information. This was the system. These were the rules. I had felt so powerless against the emotional pressure, the constant nagging suggestions that I was fading. But here, in this room, power was a matter of paperwork, of precise language, of filings and recordings. It was a power they had underestimated because they thought it belonged to people like Marcus, with his spreadsheets, not to people like me. "What is my first move?" I asked. "You go home," she said. "You reclaim your space. You present this letter. You do not engage in debate. You state the facts. If they become hostile or refuse to leave, you call the police. You have every legal right to remove trespassers from your property, which is held in trust. I will be on standby should you need further counsel during the interaction. They will be angry. They will say terrible things. They will, she agreed, her gaze steady. But their words cannot alter the documents. Their anger cannot change the recorded deed. You have moved the conflict from an emotional arena where they have been bullying you to a legal one, where you are fully fortified. Let them be angry. Let them say what they wish. It is noise. This, she said, tapping the folder, is the signal. I looked down at the summary letter again. The paper had a tangible weight. It was more than a notification, it was a verdict, one I had delivered upon myself and by extension upon them. There is one more thing, I said. I reached into my purse and retrieved my set of house keys. I slid them across the table. I would like the locks changed today, as soon as possible after I have asked them to leave. A flicker of something like approval crossed Miss Evans's face. She did not smile, but her eyes sharpened. A prudent measure. I will have my paralegal arrange for a locksmith to meet you there at a specified time. You text me when you are ready for him to come. Thank you, Evelyn. It was the first time I had used her first name. She acknowledged it with a slight incline of her head. You are welcome, Eleanor. This is your life. This is your home. We are simply ensuring the legal reality reflects that truth. She gathered all the documents back into the folder, but left the summary letter out. She placed the letter into a fresh, plain white envelope and handed it to me. The folder she kept. The originals remain here in our vault for safekeeping. You have copies in your safe deposit box. This is all you need to carry with you. I took the envelope. It was not heavy, but I felt its significance in my hand, a condensed potential energy. I stood. Is there anything else you need from me before you go? She asked, rising as well. No, I said. The strategy is clear. Then I will wait for your text. Good luck, Eleanor. I did not believe in luck. I believed in preparation. I had prepared for this moment for months, in this quiet room, with this woman who spoke the language of consequences. The party last night had been their celebration. This meeting this morning was mine. It was a silent, solemn ceremony of reclamation. I walked out of the office building, the white envelope held flat against my side. The sun was higher now, bright and clear. I got into my car and placed the envelope on the passenger seat. I did not drive immediately. I sat for a full minute, my hands on the wheel, visualizing the rooms of my house. I saw the post-party mess. I saw their sleeping, hung-over forms on my furniture. I saw their faces when they understood. Then I started the engine, shifted into drive, and pointed the car toward what was mine. I turned onto my street at 8:07 a.m. The morning sun was harsh on the evidence. Tire tracks had gouged the soft grass of my front lawn. Empty plastic cups, their contents long evaporated, dotted the flower beds like strange, wilted blooms. A bottle of champagne, now just green glass, lay on its side by the porch steps. Several cars still lined the curb, including Marcus's silver sedan and David's SUV. My bronze lamp was likely still in the back of it. I parked in my driveway behind David's car, blocking it in. I took the white envelope from the passenger seat, folded it once, and placed it in the inner pocket of my jacket. I checked my reflection in the rearview mirror. My face was composed, my silver hair neat. I saw no trace of the woman who had watched from the shadows the night before. I saw only resolve. The front door was unlocked. I pushed it open and stepped into the wreckage of my foyer. The smell hit me first. Stale wine, spilled beer, and the sour-sweet scent of emptied chip bowls. A coat was flung over the newel post. I recognized it as belonging to my niece. I closed the door behind me with a firm, audible click. The living room was worse. Cushions were scattered on the floor. 2 empty wine bottles stood on the mantel beside a framed photograph of my late husband, Robert. Someone had used my good crystal bowl, the one from my wedding set, as an ashtray. The carpet was stained in several places. I did not pause to catalog every detail. I walked through it, my heels making a solid, deliberate sound on the hardwood floor that was visible between the debris. I went to the kitchen. Here, the party had been its most vigorous. Every counter was covered in platters crusted with food, dirty glasses and bottles. The sink was piled high. The trash can overflowed. For a moment, I simply stood in the doorway, taking it in. This was my space, the heart of my home for 40 years, treated like a frat house lounge. A groan came from the sunroom adjacent to the kitchen. I turned. My son-in-law, David, was sprawled on the wicker sofa, a blanket pulled over his legs. He was blinking, his face puffy with sleep. I walked to the coffee maker. I emptied the old filter, filled the carafe with water, measured fresh grounds from the canister I kept in the freezer. I pressed the start button. The familiar gurgle and hiss filled the heavy silence. The noise seemed to penetrate David's haze. He pushed himself up on one elbow, squinting toward the kitchen. "Chloe? That you? I need aspirin, babe." "It's not Chloe," I said, my voice level. I did not turn to look at him. There was a long pause. I heard the rustle of the blanket, the creak of the wicker. "Nora?" His voice was thick with confusion and sleep. What are you doing here?" "I live here," I said, taking 2 mugs from the cabinet. "I am making coffee. Would you like a cup?" "But you're at Sunny Meadows." He said the name slowly, as if testing its reality. "No," I said, turning now to face him. He was sitting fully upright now, his hair disheveled, his shirt wrinkled. "I am not. It appears there has been a misunderstanding." His mouth opened, then closed. He looked like a fish on a dock. The sounds from the coffee maker seemed abnormally loud. Marcus said, "He said you moved in yesterday. We had a little gathering." "I saw," I said. I turned back to the counter as the coffee finished dripping. I poured a cup for myself, black. "It looked like quite a party. I saw you leave with my lamp." A different silence followed that statement, one choked with panic. I heard him stand up, the blanket falling to the floor. "Nora, listen, we were just keeping it safe for you, for when we, sorted everything out." "I see." I took a sip of my coffee. It was hot and bitter, exactly as I needed it to be. "You should wake the others. The coffee is ready." "Others?" he echoed weakly. "The house is full of cars, David. I assume the owners of those cars are still in my home. Please gather everyone in the living room. I have an announcement to make." I picked up my mug and walked past him, back into the living room. I chose my armchair, the one by the window that Robert had always claimed. I moved a discarded sweater from the seat and sat down. I placed my coffee mug on the side table, on a coaster. I waited. David's footsteps thudded up the stairs. I heard his muffled voice, then another. Marcus's sharper, demanding, "What do you mean she's here?" More footsteps, heavy and hurried, on the stairs. Marcus appeared in the archway first, still in yesterday's clothes, his face a mask of bewildered irritation. "Mom, what is this? What are you doing here? You're supposed to be at the Haven." "I never agreed to go to the Haven, Marcus. You agreed for me." Chloe came down next, tying a robe around herself. Her eyes were wide, flitting from me to Marcus to the disaster of the room. "Mom, oh my God, are you okay? Did something happen? Did they not have a room for you?" Her concern was automatic, a script she launched into without thought. "I am perfectly well, Chloe. Please sit. Everyone sit." My tone was that of a librarian instructing a noisy patron. It held a quiet, immovable authority. One by one, others emerged. My niece and her boyfriend, looking sheepish, a cousin from out of town, rubbing his neck. They filed into the living room, perching on the edges of stained sofas or standing awkwardly by the fireplace. They would not meet my eyes. The air was thick with hangovers and dawning dread. Marcus remained standing, his arms crossed. "Mom, this is ridiculous. You can't just leave the facility. We have a plan. We have arrangements." "Your arrangements were made without my consent," I said, looking directly at him. "I am informing you now that they are null and void. I am home, and before any of you leave today, there is a matter we need to discuss." Chloe moved to sit next to me, reaching for my hand. I did not pull away, but I did not clasp hers in return. My hand lay limp in her grasp. Mom, we were just so worried. This house, it's too much. We were celebrating the next chapter for you, a safe chapter. You were celebrating my absence, I corrected her, my voice still calm. I withdrew my hand from hers. You were dividing my possessions. You were toasting your freedom from the burden of me. I observed it. I read the texts. The color drained from Marcus's face. Chloe's performative concern froze, then cracked into something raw and fearful. I reached into my jacket pocket and withdrew the white envelope. I held it in my lap. All eyes in the room were fixed on it. Now, I said. Now we will talk about what happens next. I held the envelope in both hands, the crisp paper a small white rectangle against the dark wool of my lap. Every face in the room was fixed on it. The confusion, the annoyance, the residual sleepiness, all of it was giving way to a sharp, collective focus. They knew this was not a greeting card. I have made some changes, I began, my voice filling the quiet room. Legal changes to my estate plans and to the ownership of this house. I asked you to sit because you are all affected. Some of you directly. Others, I said, glancing at my niece and the cousin, because you are witnesses to the consequences of certain actions. Marcus let out a short, exasperated breath. Mom, not this again. We talked about this. You're not in a state to be making big financial decisions. We have power of attorney. You have a durable power of attorney for healthcare, Marcus. I corrected him, my tone flat. You do not have financial power of attorney. You never have. I revoked the old documents 4 months ago. His smug certainty faltered. A line appeared between his brows. What? You can't just... I can, and I did, with the counsel of my attorney, Ms. Evelyn Evans. I watched his face process the name of a stranger, an authority he did not control. I have been meeting with her since January. The process is complete. I opened the envelope. I did not remove the letter immediately. I let the silence stretch, let them watch the simple act of my fingers breaking the seal. I drew out the single sheet of paper. It was the summary letter with the law firm's elegant letterhead at the top. I will summarize, I said, though I intended to read it verbatim. This house is no longer in my name. It has been transferred to a living trust, the Hawthorne Living Trust. I am the trustee. I have full control over the property. It cannot be sold without my consent. It cannot be used as collateral. It is insulated. Chloe made a small sound, a choked gasp. A trust? Mom, why would you do that? Those things are so complicated. They cost money. They are a form of protection, I said, my eyes still on the letter. Protection I deemed necessary. Furthermore, I have executed a new will. It revokes all previous versions. In it, I have named new beneficiaries. Marcus took a step forward, his hand out as if to take the letter. I did not give it to him. New beneficiaries? What does that mean? Who? I began to read aloud. My voice did not waver. The property at 214 Maple Lane is an asset of the Hawthorne Living Trust. Upon the death of the grantor, the trustee shall distribute the net proceeds from the sale of said property after all expenses, as follows: 40% to the County Library Foundation, 40% to the Black Historical Society, and 20% to establish the Robert and Eleanor Hawthorne Scholarship for returning adult students at the community college. The silence that followed was absolute. It was not confusion. It was comprehension, cold and dawning. My niece's boyfriend looked at the floor. My cousin shifted his weight, uncomfortable. My personal effects and remaining financial assets, I continued, will be liquidated and added to the trust for the same distribution, with the exception of a few specific, sentimental items bequeathed to friends. I found the next line on the page. My voice remained clear and even. My children, Marcus James Hawthorne and Chloe Elaine Hawthorne Smith, are expressly excluded from any inheritance, distribution, or benefit from my estate, for reasons known to them. I lowered the paper. I looked first at Marcus. His face had lost all its color. He looked waxen, his mouth slightly open. He was not a businessman looking at a spreadsheet anymore. He was a man looking at a void where his future had been. What is this?" he whispered. The bluster was gone. His voice was thin. "It is a legal document," I said. "It outlines the new reality." Chloe found her voice. It was a shriek, raw and wounded. "Excluded? Excluded? For reasons known to us? What reasons, Mom? What did we do? We love you. We were trying to take care of you." Tears sprang to her eyes, real tears of shock and fury. "You were trying to dispose of me," I stated. "You held a party in my home to celebrate my removal from it. You texted about your freedom from me. You began removing my belongings before my body was cold. Those are the reasons. The document simply acknowledges that you are aware of your own behavior." "That's not true," Chloe cried, standing up. "It was a goodbye party, a send-off. We were sad to see you go." I did not argue. I looked at David, who was still standing in the kitchen doorway. "David, you have my lamp in your vehicle. Please bring it back inside." His face flushed a deep, mortified red. He did not move. "Now, David," I said. It was not a request. He turned and shuffled out the front door. The attention of the room split between me and his retreating back. It was a tangible proof, a demonstration in real time. My words were not just accusations. They were observables. Marcus seemed to deflate. He sank into the armchair opposite me, the one usually reserved for guests. "You can't do this," he said, but it was a statement of defeat, not challenge. "The house, it was supposed to be for the kids, for Lily's college. Lily is a bright girl. She can earn scholarships, or you can pay for it yourself. You have a large home and 2 luxury cars. You can manage. This is malicious," he said, finding a new angle. "A judge would overturn this in a second. You're not in your right mind. This proves it. Cutting out your own children? It's irrational." "The court will see a woman of sound mind who took proactive steps with a qualified attorney to protect her assets from predatory family members who prematurely celebrated her demise. They will see the documented evidence of that celebration. They will see the revoked power of attorney. They will see a clean, legally sound estate plan. Irrationality is not a legal term, Marcus. Undue influence is. And the only people who have attempted to exert undue influence in the last year are in this room." I placed the letter on the coffee table between us, facing them. The firm's letterhead was a dark, official stamp on the page. "This is a courtesy copy for you all to read. The originals are filed. The deed is recorded. The matter is settled." I leaned back in my chair and took another sip of my coffee. It was still warm. I watched the words sink in, watched the blood drain from their faces, replaced by the white, sickly pallor of realized loss. They had come to divvy up a future they assumed was theirs. They were leaving with nothing but the clothes they wore and the shame they had earned. For a long minute, no one spoke. The only sound was the distant hum of the refrigerator and the slow, sure rhythm of my own heart. The silence after I placed the letter on the table was not peaceful. It was thick with the static of shock, a vacuum before the storm. It was Chloe who broke it, her voice a jagged wire of indignation. "Reasons known to us? That's a lie. We have done nothing but love you and worry about you. You're twisting everything." As she spoke, the words triggered a memory. It was from last Thanksgiving, right here in this living room. The dinner had been cleared. I was telling a story about Robert and a trip we took to Savannah. I was midway through a sentence when Marcus had cut in, speaking over me to David about a football game. He hadn't even paused. He had simply raised his voice and talked, as if my voice had ceased to exist. Chloe had laughed at something David said, not noticing I had stopped speaking. I had sat there, the rest of my story unspooled, and realized I had become background noise. "We were concerned for your safety, Mom," Marcus said now, his voice straining for reasonableness. "You left the stove on twice last month. Anyone would be concerned." Another memory. I had indeed left a single burner on low with an empty tea kettle for 20 minutes. I had been distracted by a phone call. It was one time. But from that moment, it became a refrain. "Remember when you left the stove on?" they would say, introducing the topic of assisted living. "We just can't risk it." They never mentioned the 40 years of meals I had prepared without incident, the decades of managing a household. The one lapse was curated into a pattern. "It was for your own good," Chloe insisted, the tears now flowing in earnest. She had always been a pretty crier. "You're getting forgetful. We had to step in." Forgetful. The word echoed, conjuring an afternoon 3 months ago. Chloe had been visiting, helping me sort through some things. She held up my mother's pearl necklace. "You should wear this more, Mom, or maybe we should put it somewhere safe. You might misplace it." Her tone was gentle, but her eyes were assessing, already cataloging. She had begun opening my jewelry box without asking, her fingers lingering on the pieces she had always admired. I had said nothing, but that night I moved the necklace to my safe deposit box. "You make it sound so sinister," Marcus continued, rallying. "We were planning for your future, being responsible. You always taught us to be prepared." A flash of him just 6 weeks ago, standing in the sunny, sterile lobby of the Haven. He had brought brochures. "Look at the activities, Mom. Book clubs. It's perfect for you." He had been so pleased with himself, so sure of his solution. He had not asked if I wanted to live there. He had presented it as an inevitability, a done deal we were merely discussing the timing of. I had stood beside him, smiling tightly at the director, feeling the walls of my real life compress. "And the party," Chloe sobbed, "was just us trying to make the best of a hard situation. We were sad. We thought you were gone." The image of Lily in my scarf, twirling, laughing. The sound of glass clinking. The text, "Finally free." The memory was no longer a stab of pain. It was a cold, hard fact, a piece of evidence I could hold in my hand. "You were not sad," I said, my voice cutting through her performance. "You were relieved. You were celebrating an end to what you saw as a burden. Your text messages confirm it. Your actions last night confirm it. Your attempt to remove my property confirms it." "This is because we wanted you to be safe," Marcus shouted, his composure finally shredding. He stood up, pointing a finger at me. "And you repay us by throwing away your family over a misunderstanding? This is the act of a spiteful, confused old woman." Old woman. The phrase brought back a cocktail party at his house last Christmas. I had been talking to one of his colleagues about a recent biography I'd read. The colleague was engaged. Marcus had come over, put a patronizing hand on my shoulder, and said, "Now, Mom, don't bore Peter with all that book talk. Let me get you another ginger ale." He had steered me away, his smile dismissing my entire conversation as the prattling of a child. The colleague had looked embarrassed for me. I did not react to his shout. I looked at him, at the furious, bewildered man he had become. The documents are not spiteful, Marcus. They are factual. They reflect the reality of our relationship. You saw me as a problem to be solved, an asset to be managed. You ceased to see me as a person with autonomy. The law now reflects that. "We are your children," Chloe wailed, as if this fact alone nullified everything. "You were," I said, and the past tense hung in the air, stark and undeniable. "You chose to stop acting like it. You chose to conspire behind my back. You chose to value my house and my things over my happiness and my freedom. These papers are simply the legal acknowledgement of the choices you made." I watched them flounder. Their justifications were thin, rehearsed lines they had used on each other to make their plans palatable. Thrown back at them in the clear light of day, in the face of cold legal reality, the words sounded hollow even to them. They could not argue with the deed. They could not argue with the recorded trust. They could only rage against the consequence. Marcus's anger was turning inwards into a frantic calculation. I could see it in his eyes, the desperate search for a loophole, a lever. Chloe's was splintering into hysteria and blame. They were no longer a unified front against me. They were two separate, panicking individuals, connected only by their shared miscalculation. The memories that flashed before me now were not of their recent transgressions, but of them as children. Marcus, serious and careful, building a block tower. Chloe, singing loudly and off-key in a school play. The love I felt then was a physical ache, a ghost limb. I had to acknowledge it, this love that was now part of the wreckage. It did not change what I had to do. It only made the necessity of my actions more profound and more tragic. They had not just betrayed their mother. They had betrayed those children and the woman who had raised them. The law could not address that betrayal. It could only protect me from its financial consequences. And so it would. Marcus's accusation hung in the air. A spiteful, confused old woman. The words seemed to vibrate in the space between us. For a moment, no one moved. Then the dam broke, but not in the direction I had expected. It did not break toward me. It broke between them. Chloe whirled on Marcus, her tear-stained face contorting with a new, sharper anger. "This is your fault," she shrieked, her voice losing all its practiced concern. "You and your spreadsheets and your timelines. We need to move fast, Chloe. The market is good. We need to consolidate assets. This is what your rushing did." Marcus blinked, momentarily stunned that the attack was coming from her. "My fault? You were the one who said we had to have a transition gathering. You said it would make it easier on everyone. This stupid party was your idea." "I said a small family dinner," Chloe shot back, stepping toward him. "Not a rager where people start hauling furniture out the door. You were the one who told everyone she was already moved in. You sent that text. It was a figure of speech. I didn't think you'd actually start redecorating the place before her body was cold," Marcus roared back. The other people in the room, the niece, the cousin, the boyfriend, froze, spectators to an implosion. David re-entered then, holding my bronze lamp awkwardly in both hands. He stopped in the foyer, taking in the scene. His return went unnoticed by the principals. "You were just as eager," Chloe's finger jabbed toward Marcus's chest. "Don't you dare pin this all on me. You had the realtor on speed dial. You were already talking about listing price points. Because someone has to be practical," Marcus yelled. "Someone has to think about the financial reality. You were too busy picking out which curtains you wanted for your sunroom." Chloe gasped, as if slapped. The pretense was fully gone now. "I was thinking about the family, about creating a space we could all use." "You were thinking about yourself, just like you always do." Marcus's voice was a sneer. "Everything is about appearances for you. The perfect house, the perfect life. Mom was just a messy part of the picture you wanted to crop out." The cruelty of his words, the truth in them, made Chloe recoil. Her mouth worked, but for a second no sound came out. Then she found a new target. She turned her fury on David, who was still holding the lamp. "And you idiot! Why did you take the lamp? Why would you do something so blatantly stupid?" David's face flushed again, deeper this time. "You said to start setting aside the good stuff. You said the vultures would pick it over if we didn't." "I didn't mean to load it into your car at the party," she screamed. "I meant make a list. You have the subtlety of a brick." "Well, you said your mother's sapphire ring would look perfect reset." David fired back, a rare defiance in his voice. "You've had that design bookmarked for a year." I sat perfectly still in my chair. The chaos swirled around me, but it was as if I were behind a pane of thick glass. Their voices were loud, their gestures wild, but they reached me as distant, meaningless noise. I was observing a chemical reaction I had initiated. Their alliance, built on a shared greed and a mutual disdain for my autonomy, was decomposing under the heat of exposed consequence. My niece, Sarah, finally spoke up. her voice young and strained. "Guys, please stop. This isn't helping." She looked at me, her eyes pleading. "Aunt Nora, I'm so sorry. I didn't know. I thought it was just a weird goodbye party. I wouldn't have come if—" "It's fine, Sarah," I said, my voice calm, cutting easily through their shouting. "You are not the issue here." Her intervention broke the rhythm of their fight. Marcus turned his seething attention back to me, but the energy had fragmented. He was no longer a commanding general. He was a man who had lost control of his troops and the battle plan. This is what you wanted, isn't it?" he spat. "To turn us against each other, to watch us fight over the scraps." "There are no scraps to fight over, Marcus," I said, my tone devoid of emotion. "The estate is directed elsewhere. You are fighting over heir. You are fighting because you have been revealed to each other, and you do not like what you see." Chloe sank onto the sofa, burying her face in her hands. Her shoulders shook, but I could not tell if it was from rage or genuine grief now. The performance was over. This was the exhausted reality underneath. "We've lost everything," she moaned, her voice muffled. "You have lost what you never had," I corrected quietly. "You assumed possession. You were mistaken." Marcus began to pace, a caged animal. "This isn't over. We'll contest it. We'll get doctors to testify. We'll prove you weren't competent." "You are welcome to try," I said. "Ms. Evans has already documented my mental capacity assessments from last month. Conducted by an independent geriatric psychologist, you chose Marcus. You insisted on it, remember? Just to be sure, Mom." "The report states I am of sound mind and exceptionally capable of managing my affairs. It is in the file. Your own due diligence has been weaponized against you." He stopped pacing. The last color drained from his face. He remembered. He had been so proud of arranging that assessment, a final box to check. He had not considered that a positive result would fortify my position, not weaken it. The room descended into a brittle, exhausted quiet. The fury had burned out, leaving behind the ash of realization. They had played their hand and lost. Their carefully constructed narrative of concerned caregivers had collapsed, exposing the frantic, greedy children beneath. They had no more arguments, no more justifications that could withstand the legal architecture I had built. All that remained was the ugly truth of their motives, laid bare in the center of the room, stinking like the stale party trash surrounding us. I watched them sit in it. I did not offer a way out. The silence after their fight was heavy, final. They were all looking at the floor, at their hands, anywhere but at each other, or at me. The energy had been spent. There was nothing left to say that would change the facts printed on the letter on the coffee table. I let the quiet settle for a full minute, allowing the finality to sink into the room. Then I stood up. The movement was smooth, deliberate. All eyes snapped to me. "It is time for you to leave," I said. My voice was not loud, but it carried the full weight of the morning. "All of you. Now." Marcus looked up, his expression hollow. "Leave? Mom, we need to talk about this. We need to figure out—" "There is nothing to figure out," I interrupted. "The matter is settled. You are no longer welcome in my home. You will gather any personal items you have here, coats, purses, phones, and you will go." Chloe lifted her head, her face blotchy. "You're kicking us out? Your own children." "You ended your tenancy here last night when you celebrated my eviction from my own life," I stated. "I am merely formalizing it. This is no longer a family gathering place. It is my private residence. You are trespassing." The word trespassing had a legal, sharp sound. It cut through the residual, familial haze. David, still holding my lamp, finally stepped fully into the room. "Where should I—" he began, nodding at the lamp. "Put it on the table by the door," I said. "Then get your things and go." And he did as he was told, placing the lamp carefully on the small hall table, as if it were explosive. The action was a silent admission of guilt, a punctuation mark on the morning. I reached into my jacket pocket and retrieved my phone. I unlocked it and opened my text messages. I typed a brief message to Ms. Evans. Proceeding with Phase 2, please send the locksmith ETA 30 minutes. I sent it. The soft whoosh of the sent message was the only sound. What was that? Marcus asked, suspicion narrowing his eyes. I am having the locks changed, I said, putting the phone away. Today, a locksmith will be here within the hour. Any belongings you leave behind will be placed in storage. You may contact my attorney's office to arrange a time to collect them. You will not be given a new key. Chloe stood up, her body trembling. You can't be serious. This is our home, too. We grew up here. You did, I acknowledged, and you chose to defile it. You chose to treat it and me with contempt. That choice has consequences. One of them is that you forfeit the privilege of crossing this threshold. I walked to the front door and opened it. The morning sunlight streamed in, illuminating the dusty, stained air of the foyer. I held the door open and stood beside it, my posture straight, my face impassive. I did not look at them. I looked out at my damaged lawn, at the clear sky. It was a silent, powerful eviction. One by one, they moved. Sarah, my niece, was the first. She came over, her eyes red. She stopped in front of me. "I'm so sorry, Aunt Nora." Her voice was a whisper. "Thank you, Sarah," I said, my tone not unkind but final. She slipped out the door. The cousin followed, muttering a quick, awkward goodbye. He did not meet my gaze. David collected his coat and Chloe's purse. He walked to the door, pausing. He looked like he wanted to say something, but no words came. He stepped out onto the porch. Chloe was next. She walked slowly, as if in a trance. She stopped in front of me, her face a wreck of smeared makeup and despair. "Mother," she said, the word formal, strained. "Goodbye, Chloe," I said. A flash of pure, undiluted hatred crossed her features then, brief and startling. It was the real Chloe, the one beneath the concerned daughter act. She hated me for outmaneuvering her, for exposing her, for taking back what she thought she owned. Then it was gone, replaced by a numb emptiness. She walked out. Only Marcus remained. He stood in the center of the living room amidst the trash of his celebration, looking at the walls, the floors, the future he had measured and counted on. His shoulders slumped. He was a man who had lost a major asset, and he was finally computing the total, irreversible loss. He walked to the door, his steps heavy. He stopped in the doorway, turning to look at me. "You've destroyed this family," he said, his voice low and cold. "No," I replied, meeting his gaze evenly. "You did that. I merely documented the wreckage and changed the locks." He stared at me for a long moment, then turned and walked down the steps without another word. I watched him get into his car. He did not look back at the house. I closed the door. The solid thud of the deadbolt engaging was a profoundly satisfying sound. I stood with my back against the wood in the sudden, profound silence of my reclaimed home. The air was stale with the smells of their party and their panic. The rooms were a disaster, but the house was mine again. Unambiguously, legally, completely mine. Through the narrow window beside the door, I saw their cars start and pull away one by one. I did not move until the last taillight disappeared around the corner. Then I pushed myself away from the door and looked around at the mess. It was a large mess. It would take hours to clean. But for the first time in a long time, the work ahead felt like my own. I stood with my back against the door for several minutes listening to the silence. It was not empty anymore. It was full of potential. I pushed away from the wood and surveyed the battlefield. The first order of business was not cleaning. It was fortification. I went to the kitchen, stepping over a tipped-over chip bowl. I retrieved my largest trash bags from under the sink. I put on a pair of yellow rubber gloves that hung by the window. Then I walked back into the living room and began. I did not start with the sentimental items or the furniture. I started with the obvious trash. Empty bottles, crumpled napkins, plastic cups with dregs of flat soda. I picked them up and dropped them into the black bag. The sound was a steady, rustling percussion. I worked methodically, from the center of the room outward. I did not think about who had held which cup. I thought only about removal. When the living room floor was clear of debris, I moved to the dining room, more of the same. I emptied the crystal bowl that had been used as an ashtray, wiping the vile residue into the bag with a paper towel. I did not pause to be angry. It was an object. It could be washed. The doorbell rang. I checked my watch. 32 minutes since my text. I pulled off one glove and went to the door. A man in a uniform shirt with a locksmith company logo stood there, a heavy toolbox in his hand. Mrs. Hawthorne? Sent by Evans and Associates. Yes, I said. Please come in. You'll be rekeying all exterior doors. Front, back, and the side door to the garage. Yes, ma'am. He stepped inside, his professional gaze taking in the disarray without comment. He got to work on the front door first, removing the old lock cylinder. I returned to my task. As he drilled and tinkered, I filled bag after bag. I tied them shut and carried them out to the large bin by the garage. The physical exertion was a relief. It was measurable progress. Each bag removed was a piece of their presence erased. I moved into the kitchen. This was a larger project. I started by clearing the counters, scraping food waste into the disposal, stacking dirty dishes. I filled the sink with hot, soapy water. I washed my good platters and crystal glasses by hand, carefully, one by one. The warm water on my gloved hands was soothing. I rinsed each piece and set it on a clean towel to dry. I did not think about the food that had been on them or the conversations that had swirled around them. I thought about the fact that they were mine and I was taking care of them. The locksmith finished the front door and moved to the back. The metallic sounds of his work were a background rhythm to my washing. He came to the kitchen entry. "Ma'am, I'm done with the back. Just the garage side door left. I'll need to step outside to your panel." "Of course," I said. I dried my hands and went to the garage to unlock the interior door for him. When all the locks were changed, he presented me with 6 new keys, all identical, shiny and sharp-edged. "All set," he said. "These are the only copies." I took them. They were cool in my palm. "Thank you." I locked the door behind him, testing the new, smooth action of the deadbolt. The sound was different, firmer, final. I returned to the kitchen. The dishes were done. I wiped down every counter, every surface with a disinfectant spray. I mopped the floor. The smell of lemon and bleach slowly overpowered the smell of stale party. I moved back to the living room with a vacuum cleaner. I vacuumed the stained carpet, going over each spot multiple times. I plumped the cushions and returned them to their proper places. I used a special cloth to polish my bronze lamp, now back on its table, removing David's fingerprints. The sun was beginning to sink, casting long amber rectangles across the clean floors. I had been working for over 5 hours. I was tired, but it was a clean, muscular tiredness, not the sick exhaustion of betrayal. I gathered all the used cleaning cloths and the rubber gloves and put them in a final trash bag. I tied it and took it outside. The bin was now full. I wheeled it to the curb for tomorrow's pickup. Back inside, I did one more walkthrough. The house was not just clean, it was restored. Order had been imposed. The only remaining evidence was the faint, fading smell of bleach and the memory, which was not a physical thing I could remove. I went to every window in the house, front and back, and opened them wide. The cool evening air rushed in, carrying the scent of cut grass from a neighbor's yard. It swept through the rooms, pushing out the last vestiges of staleness, of spilled wine and heated arguments. I stood in the middle of the living room, the cross breeze lifting the hairs on my arms, and breathed in the new air. The silence was no longer a void. It was space. It was mine. I had swept up their confetti. I had washed away their fingerprints. I had changed the locks. The physical reclamation was complete. The house was quiet, clean, and empty. It was, for the first time in a very long while, waiting for me to decide what would fill it. I woke with the sun. It was not an alarm that pulled me from sleep or the distant sound of a television in another room. It was the gradual brightening of my bedroom, the way the light fell across the quilt in a familiar, quiet pattern. I lay still for a few minutes, listening. The house was silent in a way it had not been for years. There was no underlying tension, no anticipation of a visit or a difficult conversation. The silence was pure. It was mine. I rose, made my bed neatly, and dressed in soft, worn clothes suitable for a day alone. I padded barefoot to the kitchen. The room gleamed from yesterday's work. Everything was in its place. I filled the kettle with fresh water and set it on the stove. I measured loose tea into my favorite pot, the white one with the tiny blue flowers. While the water heated, I stood at the kitchen window and looked out at my backyard. The grass needed cutting. I made a mental note to call the service later in the week. The kettle whistled. I poured the water, let the tea steep. I took a single mug from the cabinet, the one Robert had given me that read, "World's Okayest Librarian." I poured the tea, added a slice of lemon, and carried it to the small table in the breakfast nook. I sat in my usual chair. The morning paper was not delivered anymore, but I had a book waiting there, a novel I'd been meaning to read for months. I opened it to the marked page. I read for an hour, sipping my tea. The only sounds were the turning of pages, the occasional chirp of a bird outside, the hum of the refrigerator. I did not feel lonely. I felt focused. The story absorbed me completely. When my tea was gone, I got up to make a second cup. As I passed through the living room, my phone, which I had left charging on the side table, began to buzz. I glanced at the screen. It was Marcus. I watched it vibrate until it stopped. A notification appeared for a voicemail. A moment later, it buzzed again with a text message. I did not read it. I walked into the kitchen and made more tea. I returned to my book. The phone buzzed 2 more times over the next half hour. Chloe, then Marcus again. Each time, I looked at the name, acknowledged its presence, and returned to my reading. Their demands, their panic, their recriminations were now external forces, like bad weather. I was indoors. I was dry. The locks were changed. Shortly before noon, the phone buzzed with a different number. It was Ms. Evans's office. I answered. "Eleanor, it's Evelyn Evans. I'm calling to check in. How are you managing?" Her voice was its usual professional calm. It was a welcome sound. "I am well, Evelyn. Thank you. The house is clean. The locks are changed. I am having a quiet morning." "Excellent. I'm glad to hear it." I heard the rustle of paper on her end. "I've had no contact from your children's counsel, which is unsurprising so soon. The documents are all filed and served. The process is complete on our end. How are you feeling?" It was a more personal question than her usual. I considered it. "I feel clear," I said. "The air is clear. I am tired, but it is a good tired. I am not angry anymore. I am resolved." "That is the healthiest possible outcome," she said. "You have taken control. That is the most important thing. Remember, you are under no obligation to speak to them. Any communication can go through this office. If they come to the property, you call the police. You are the legal resident and trustee. There is no ambiguity." "I understand. Thank you, Evelyn, for everything, for listening, for not treating me like a confused old woman." There was a brief pause on the line. "It was my professional and personal pleasure, Eleanor. You are a sharp client. You knew what you needed, and you had the courage to act. My job was simply to provide the tools. Should you need anything at all, a review of the trust, advice on property management, you have my number." "I will. Thank you again." We ended the call. I placed the phone back on the table, face down. The interaction had been straightforward, affirming. It was a bracket around the entire experience, a formal closing of the strategic phase. I spent the afternoon tending to my indoor plants. I watered them, wiped dust from their leaves, trimmed a few yellowing edges. They were quiet, undemanding companions. Their growth was slow and visible only over weeks. I appreciated their patience. Later, I made a simple lunch, a salad, a piece of toast. I ate at the kitchen table reading another chapter of my book. After, I washed the single plate, the single fork, the knife, and the glass. I dried them and put them away. The phone buzzed intermittently throughout the day. I did not answer. The buzzing became part of the background, like a fly at a window, persistent but easily ignored. My peace was not an absence of noise. It was the ability to choose which sounds to acknowledge. I chose the sound of pages turning, of water running, of my own breath. As evening approached, I felt a sense of deep, unburdened contentment. It was not joy exactly. It was something quieter and more durable, satisfaction. The house was in order. My life was my own again. The future, which had been shrunk and defined by others into a small room at Sunny Meadows, was now a wide, open field. I did not need to walk into it today. It was enough to know it was there, and that I would decide my own path through it, at my own pace. For now, the path led to my armchair, my book, and the profound, sweet silence of a home that held only me. The following Saturday morning, I put on my old gardening trousers and a wide-brimmed hat. The weather was mild, the sky a clear, pale blue. I gathered my tools from the garage, a trowel, a hand rake, a kneeling pad. I carried them to the back corner of my garden, a sunny patch that had become overrun with weeds and a tired, leggy shrub. I had decided to clear it and plant new perennials. I worked for 2 hours. The physical labor was demanding but straightforward. I dug out the old shrub's root system, my trowel cutting through the dense, dark soil. I pulled weeds by hand, ensuring I got the entire root. The sun warmed my back. The only sounds were the scrape of metal on earth, the rustle of leaves, and the distant, intermittent song of birds. My mind was quiet, focused on the task: clear, turn, prepare. I was sifting the last of the soil through my fingers when I heard the click of the gate latch. I looked up. My neighbor, Alma Perkins, stood there, holding a small glass of iced tea. Alma was around my age, a widow who had lived 2 houses down for 30 years. We were friendly, not close, but we had shared many conversations over fences about roses and municipal water rates. "Eleanor," she called, her voice cheerful. "I saw you working and thought you might need some refreshment. It's just instant, but it's cold." I wiped my hands on my trousers and stood, accepting the glass. "Thank you, Alma. That's very kind." The tea was sweet and lemony. I took a long drink. She stepped into the garden, her eyes taking in the freshly turned earth. "Starting a new bed?" "Yes," I said. The old spirea had seen better days. I'm putting in some coneflowers and black-eyed Susans, things that can handle the sun and don't need much fussing. "Good choices," she said, nodding. She looked back toward my house. The windows were open. No music played. No voices carried from inside. "House seems quiet these days," she remarked. Her tone was not probing, merely observational. She had likely seen the cars, the party, the subsequent departures. The neighborhood grapevine was efficient. I took another sip of the tea. I looked at my house, the white clapboard bright in the sun, the dark, empty windows. I thought of the silence inside, a silence I had chosen and curated. I thought of the new locks, the clean rooms, the single coffee mug in the sink. I thought of the legal documents in the vault and the trust that held the deed. I felt no need to explain any of it to Alma. It was mine. I turned back to her and smiled. It was a genuine smile, one that felt easy on my face. "It is," I said. "It's exactly as loud as I want it to be." Alma looked at me for a long moment. Her eyes, wise and crinkled at the corners, held no pity. She saw a woman standing in her own garden covered in dirt, holding a glass of iced tea. She gave a slow, understanding nod. "That's the best kind of quiet there is," she said. "It is," I agreed. She patted my arm lightly. "Well, I'll let you get back to it. The coneflowers will be lovely." You'll have to show me when they bloom. She took the empty glass from my hand. I will. Thank you for the tea, Alma. Anytime, dear. She turned and walked back out the gate, latching it softly behind her. I stood for a moment, watching her go. Then I knelt back down on the pad. I opened the bag of garden soil I had bought and began mixing it into the native earth, enriching it. I took the first small coneflower plant from its plastic pot, gently loosened its roots, and placed it in the hole I had prepared. I pressed the soil firmly around its base. I planted 6 more. I watered them in with the hose, a gentle spray that darkened the soil to a rich brown. The plants looked small and vulnerable in the large, cleared space, but their green was vibrant, their posture hopeful. They would grow. They would spread. They would come back next year, stronger. I cleaned my tools at the outdoor faucet, dried them, and returned them to the garage. I went inside, washed my hands at the kitchen sink, and made a fresh pot of coffee. I poured a cup and carried it out to the porch. I sat in the rocking chair Robert had built, the one that faced the garden. I rocked slowly, sipping my coffee. I watched the new plants. I listened to the quiet. It was not the silence of absence or abandonment. It was the quiet of a page turning, of a door closing, of soil settling around new roots. It was full of my own breath, my own thoughts, my own plans. The future was no longer a dim corridor leading to a single small room. It was as wide as this garden, as open as this sky. I would decide what to plant in it. I would decide when to sit and when to work. I would decide who to let pass the gate. I finished my coffee. The sun was high now, warm on my face. I felt a deep, solid peace, hard-won and carefully constructed. It was not given to me. I had built it, piece by piece, document by document, weed by weed. It was mine. I owned it. And for the first time in a very long time, that was all I needed.